ओम अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपा कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरुं वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगणरघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्री राधा कृष्ण पादान सहगण ललिता श्री विशाखान्वितांश्च हे कृष्णा करुणा सिंधो दीनबंधो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कांत राधा कांता नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंदा हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna. So we'll continue from verse 25. So we are currently studying the fourth section, which is liberation through focusing one's consciousness on super soul. In this, we also studied the characteristics, the internal and external characteristics of a liberated soul. Verse 25 onwards, we'll study. Let's read it here. Labhante brahma nirvana vasaya kalmasha chinnadvaitya yatatmana sarvabhute sarvabhuta hiterata. Yeah, Aranyamatas, can you read?
Sure. Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Those who are beyond the dualities that arise from doubts, whose minds are engaged within, who are always busy working for the welfare of all living beings, and who are free from all sins, achieve liberation in the Supreme.
Yeah. So this is another characteristic of a liberated soul. Those who are beyond dualities that arise from doubts, whose minds are engaged in. So liberated souls are engaged, their minds are within. Generally, for us who are not liberated, our minds are always engaged outside. For these people, the minds are engaged within, and who are always busy working for the welfare of all living beings. Because uh, because they are not self-interested. Generally, in this world, people are self-interested. They want to, they want gain, right? Anything they do, they want gain. But because a liberated soul is not self-interested, everything he does is for the welfare of other living entities. For example, we can see all the sannyasis in ISKCON, they don't own a place. Every few days, every 3-4 days, they go to different places and share the message of God, do different projects so that everybody can live a happy and peaceful life. That is their goal. These people are free from all sins and achieve liberation in the Supreme. And because they live in that way, without expecting anything from this world, they will be freed from all sinful reactions and achieve liberation in the Supreme. So they achieve liberation. Yeah. So this is basically action in Krishna consciousness. Engages in purifying external activities by working for the benefit of others. So any activity such a person does is for the welfare of others, not just material welfare, the spiritual welfare, right? So what is the best thing we can give to a person. For example, right? There are various things we can give in charity. Suppose there is a person who is in need, right? He may be in need of food. So you can feed him and satisfy him for one day. Or you can engage him in some work and pay him some money, and he may be engaged for a month or say years, right? So like that, when we help others, there are various levels at which we can help. One is, just physical body. Within the physical body, you can just feed him, or you can give him some work uh, and engage in such a way that he gets some salary and lives on his own. Other thing is you can educate him materially so that he can completely live on by himself, right? So these are all various ways of helping others. But the highest of all kind of welfare activities that we can do for others is, the highest is to actually connecting them to the spiritual roots, giving the understanding, giving the knowledge about who they are, what is the purpose of life, what they have to do to achieve the perfection of life, and help them in engage and do such activities. By doing such help, spiritual welfare, by taking care of the spiritual welfare, they don't need to even come back to this world again, because they will be achieving liberation after this life, right? So the highest welfare is actually helping spiritually somebody, because that will solve all problems altogether, right? So a spirit, advanced soul, they engage for the welfare of others. And the true welfare is actually to give spiritual guidance and spiritual direction and uplift people spiritually. Because once they do, they get higher taste and they never have to come back to this world again. They can perfect their life. So what is the highest welfare way? What? To revive forgetfulness of Krishna, being the supreme enjoyer, proprietor, and well-wisher. Means the highest welfare is to make one person understand his true position in this world, who they are, who is God, what's the relationship with them, what one should do to perfect one's life. Who can engage in such welfare work? One cannot engage in such first-class welfare work without being liberated in this world. So, who can do such welfare, ultimate welfare work? Only a person with spiritual realization can do ultimately. Right? So what is the imperfect understanding of welfare activities? So many people think physical welfare is all in all. Right? They think there is nothing more than just doing physical welfare, like feeding the belly, or giving some material education. These are all welfare works, no doubt about it. But they will only solve temporary problems. That is when they are not the highest welfare. The highest welfare is to actually bring one to spiritual realization. That is the real help. Yeah, because all the difficulties one faces in this world, like stomach problem or health problem or financial problem or emotional problems, all these exist because one exists in the material world. If he doesn't even exist in the material world, there is none of those problems even exist. So the real solution is actually, the real solution is to actually connect one to the source, the Paramatma, the Supreme Lord. Yeah. And the qualification of a person who can do such welfare activity, just like any activity requires a qualification. For example, if I want to perform, the job of a software engineer, I need certain qualification. I need to understand, coding language. I need to understand what is design, what is architecture, and I need to do that. Right? And similarly, if you want to if you want to operate somebody's eyes, you need to have certain qualification, like an ophthalmologist who is qualified in surgery to perform such operation, right? So similarly, a person what is the qualification for a person who can really help spiritually? He is beyond the dualities that arise from doubts. The person who is beyond the dualities that arise from doubts. So mind is, for such a person, mind is engaged within. Thus, one is free from all sins and achieves Brahma Nirvana stage, or liberation in the Supreme. Kama Krodha Vimuktanam Yatinam Yatachetasam Abhito Brahma Nirvanam Vartate Viditatmanam. Archana Mataji.
Yes, Prabhuji. Those who are free from anger and all material desires, who are self realized, self disciplined, and constantly endeavoring for perfection, are assured of liberation in the Supreme in the very near future.
This is like a promise from Lord Himself. What is He saying? One should act without anger in this world. Right? So there are different types of anger. There are genuine angers. For example, if you see Hanumanji, when he meets Ravana in his palace, at one point Ravana tries to mock Hanumanji by putting fire on the tail, because for a monkey, tail is a matter of pride, and Ravana wants to, insult him and want to burn the tail of Hanumanji. And what does Hanuman? And to burn the tail, Ravana orders, his soldiers to actually put a oily cloth on the tail so that they can burn. Hanumanji expands his tail, far and wide, and these people tie entirely, they tie it, and they put fire on it. And what does he do? Hanumanji goes all around and burns all the Lanka. And to burn Lanka, like to create fire of that kind, one needs to be angry. Without anger, one cannot do such activity, right? He needs to be really revengeful to actually do that. But Hanuman's desire is motivated by the service to Lord Ram, right? He's not doing for his own benefit. His anger is not because he was insulted in this way or anything like that. He knows, he's acting in the capacity of servant of Ram, right? So that anger, right, for the service of Lord Ram or Lord Krishna, that anger is fine. But if we are angry for reasons like unfulfilled desires, I have certain desires, and my desires were hampered because of the situations around me, and so I become mad and angry. No, we should not be angry like that. So that's the whole point of this. So those who are free from anger and all material desires. In other words, those who are free from anger motivated by material desires. Generally, people become angry, in this world because they had unmet expectations from people or society or others, right? So that is how they become angry. But a self-realized soul should not be angry for his own selfish needs, right? Who are self-realized, self-disciplined, and constantly endeavoring for perfection. Constantly endeavoring for perfection means they're constantly serious about the purpose of life and engage every single day in spiritual activities. For example, we all chant the holy name every single day. We don't, for no reason or rhyme, we don't just stop doing that. Once you become very serious, you want to chant every day without missing, right? So that is like constant endeavor, spiritual endeavor, right, for perfection, and are assured of liberation in the Supreme in the very near future. Right? If you do these things from your side, you don't become angry, you stay self-disciplined, and you always, every single day, without missing, you practice spiritual activities like worshiping Lord, chanting, studying scriptures like Bhagavad Gita. You do that wherever you may be. You are in America, India, wherever you're a family man or a sannyasi or whatever, it doesn't matter. If you do these activity, Krishna is assuring that you would achieve supreme in this very life. He didn't say very life, but you are assured of liberation. Just stay self-disciplined. Don't express anger for selfish needs, and daily continue your sadhana. That is itself sufficient to achieve perfection, or achieve liberation. Yeah. So this is the Bhagavatam verse from 4th canto, confirms this fact as follows. Yatpada pankaja palasa vilasa bhaktya karmasyam gratitam udgatayanti santha tadvanan rikta matayo yatayopi ruddha srota ganastam aranam bhaja vasudevam. Yeah. Can one of you read? Harsha Dinesh, Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Yes.
Just try to worship in devotional service Vasudeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Even great sages are not able to control the forces of the senses as effectively as those who are engaged in transcendental bliss by serving the lotus feet of the Lord, uprooting the deep-grown desire for fruitive activities. Should I continue?
Yeah, that's good enough, Prabhu.
Okay.
So this is a very important verse. It says, even great sages are not able to control the forces of the senses as effectively as those who are engaged in the transcendental bliss by serving the lotus feet of the Lord, uprooting the deep-grown desire for fruitive activities. Yeah. So in the past, there are many stories of great sages like Vishwamitra, those who were, in meditation, practicing Ashtanga Yoga for many thousands of years. They could not control their senses, and they could not control their anger. For example, so you hear that the story of Vishwamitra, right? He was meditating for many years, for hundreds and hundreds of years. And then on one fine day, Indraji sends one Apsara to disturb his meditation. You all might know the reason why Indra sends. So Indra was a demigod in the heavenly planet, the Swargaloka. He is the head of it. And he was fearful that Vishwamitra Muni, by his power of meditation, because he was such a serious yogi, he thinks that maybe Vishwamitra Muni wants to become the next Indra. Right? I told, right, Indra is a post. Currently, it is held by Purandara. Purandara is the name of the individual who is holding the post of Indra. So he gets the fear that maybe Vishwamitra wants my position. That's the problem with any person who holds anything in this material world. He thinks that, hey, I'm the president today. Maybe this guy wants to become president. That is why he's behaving like this. So they have doubts. So that is the nature of material world. In the material world, everybody thinks that somebody is a danger to my position. That is the nature of the material world. But not those who are spiritually minded, think like that. So he sends Apsara, and Apsara comes, I think Urvasi comes, and she was dancing before Vishwamitra Muni, and while she was dancing, her ankle bells were resounding very beautifully, charmingly, and Vishwamitra Muni's meditation breaks. He opens his eyes and sees this lady, and he likes her, and so he asks for her in marriage, and his meditation breaks. He takes a long break from meditation. He stops all his meditation for many years, and he leads regular grihastha life, and has children and all. And then after a few years, he thinks, hey, my God, what did I do? And he realizes this must be the plan of Indra. He must be doing this. And all my power is gone now. The power of meditation I used to have. And then, he breaks away from her and goes back to meditation again. Again, he spends, many years in meditation. Indra again, thinks that this guy is again resuming his meditation. Now he's again a threat. So he's going to send another Apsara, Ramba this time, to disturb Vishwamitra Muni. So Vishwamitra Muni, so the first time he falls prey to lust, because he was very much attracted to this heavenly damsel. So he falls prey to lust. So second time, he again the same story repeats. The ankle bill sounds and sweet, charming voices of heavenly damsel he hears, and then this time he really gets mad because one time he's already had bad experience. He doesn't want to do the same mistake again. He opens his eyes and sees this beautiful Apsara, but in this instance he becomes quite an angry person, and in that anger he curses that Apsara. Because he could not control his anger, that lady, she is just dancing. Just because somebody is doing doesn't mean that you have the right to do whatever you like, right? He should be able to control his senses. He could not, and he falls prey to anger and loses again the power of meditation that he did for many years. So even though such a person is a great yogi for many years, thousands of years practicing Ashtanga yoga, even such a powerful person could not control his anger and lust. What to speak of anybody else? So in many verses, these stories were shared to clarify the difference in the process of Ashtanga yoga to Bhakti yoga. There is also another story of Durvasa Muni. One time Durvasa Muni visits the what's his name? Yeah, anyway. So
Shakuntala, he curses Shakuntala. Durvasa Muni.
I'm not talking about that story.
But I had another question, Prabhuji. When this Vishwamitra Muni falls prey to Menaka, that was Menaka for the first time. And he marries her, then they have a daughter called Shakuntala, right?
Oh yeah. That's the
First time.
yeah. Sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and through Shakuntala, Bharat was born, and through Bharat, Bharatvarsha was born,
Correct.
was created. Or so, isn't it was destined like this thing to happen? Otherwise,
It is destined.
I,
It is destined, but in the process, the yogis, everybody has a lesson in this thing, right? But the yogi himself fell down because he has that weakness. He fell down in the process. No, ultimately it is destined, but again, everything is destined, but still, it also exposes certain weaknesses in individuals, and they are lessons for those individuals. For example, for Vishwamitra, he has these, even though after meditation for so many years, he could not control his lust and anger. Okay, so in comparison, yeah, this in another instance where Durvasa Muni is again a great Ashtanga yogi. He visits the he visits the place of Ambarish Maharaj. Okay, so Ambarish Maharaj is a great devotee of Lord Vishnu, and even though he was a great king, he was always constantly Krishna conscious with his with his eyes every single day in the morning, he wants to take darshan of the Lord. With his hands, he wants to feed the devotees of the Lord. With his mouth, he wants to sing the glories of the Lord. With his ears, he wants to hear the stories and pastimes of the Lord. In this way, he was completely engaging all his senses in the service of the Lord. Okay? So for Durvasa Muni, so that is Ambarish Maharaj. And he was so famous in the world when he was ruling because of his devotional nature and such his devotional wisdom. He was so famous that everybody in his country and the world loved him. And Durvasa Muni was not very happy with this. He thinks that, what is this king? He's just a king. Why is he getting so much fame? And he might be very proud. He does his own calculation in his mind about what this king is, And then one day he comes and visits him. And of course, when a great yogi comes, he had to be received nicely and he has to be respected in every way. So he receives him nicely and makes arrangements for his comforts. But then Durvasa Muni goes out to take bath and come back and have his lunch. But that was a time when, so on that day in the morning, that was the day after Ekadasi. So the king was performing the Ekadasi Vrata, right? Ekadasi Vrata means he is fasting for the welfare of his citizens. And so he needed to break the fast at the right time. There is a muhurta and the timing when the fasting can be broken. So the next day, the time came when he has to break the fast. But there is also an etiquette, guest etiquette, that before the guest eats anything, the host should never eat food. That is a Vedic etiquette. So the Durvasa Muni went to get ready, get refresh himself, but it took a while for him to come back. In the meantime, his Ekadasi Vrata had to be broken. So he consults his ministers, and the minister says, okay, you don't need to eat prasadam to break it. Instead, eat tulsi leaf. By eating tulsi leaf, it is said that it is neither like breaking nor not breaking, meaning it satisfies the need to break the fast, but it is also not like eating anything, because so that was the advice he was given. So following the advice of his his spiritual guides, Ambarish Maharaj breaks the fast. Durvasa Muni comes back, hears about what has happened, and he thinks that was an insult to the guest, and he becomes mad and angry at him. And he curses, he creates a big demon to kill Ambarish Maharaj. That was such a punishment for such a small mistake, but still he does that. And Ambarish Maharaj, he is such a devoted soul, because he had such faith in Lord. All he does was he was just folds his hand and prays to the Lord to accept whatever happens in his life as the mercy of the Lord. He doesn't want to object to the he could have counter cursed. He's powerful enough because he's such an elevated devotee, but still he doesn't do that. He actually prays to the Lord, just surrenders. Immediately, Lord from Vaikunta immediately sends a Sudarshan Chakra to actually protect Ambarish Maharaj. That Sudarshan Chakra kills the demon and also runs after Durvasa Muni. Durvasa Muni now goes to all the lokas. He goes to Brahmaloka, tries to get the help of Brahmaji. He says, I can't help. It is Vishnu's Chakra, I can't help. And then he goes to Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva says, this is beyond my jurisdiction. I can't protect you. And then this person is so powerful, he goes to Vaikunta, directly to Vishnu, and prays to Lord Vishnu. And Lord Vishnu himself says, if my devotee is upset, I can't do much. I can't stop. I don't want to, stop this Sudarshana. The only person who can save you is the devotee himself. If he forgives you, you are saved. Then Durvash Muni all the way goes back to Ambarish Maharaj and falls at his feet. Ambarish Maharaj, being such a humble devotee, even though he is a great king of entire world, he takes a humble position. He says, who am I to forgive you? You are such a great yogi, and he immediately forgives. I don't need to forgive you, but if you want me to, yes, I will do. There is nothing, there is nothing mistake that you did. He says like that, and then ultimately, the Vishnu Chakra goes back. So that is, now you look at Ambarish Maharaj. He is just simple grihastha, praying to the Lord every single day, spending all his using all his senses in the service of Lord. He was not sitting in meditation for, doesn't have any mystic powers. He's not, he's not secluded. He's just like everybody else, but he was a devotee of Lord. Compared to Durvash Muni, he was a powerful yogi who has power to go to all the lokas, create demons at will, and such a powerful yogi. But in this story, we can understand a simple devotee, becoming a simple devotee is much more better and greater than actually becoming a great yogi who meditates on, who does Ashtanga yoga and achieves mystic powers and all. Right? So that was the story here I was remembering. Right? Yeah. Simply because a devotee, Ashtanga yogi, he wants to, he wants to either merge into the Lord, right? So he still has the desire. But for a devotee, he doesn't mind anything. For a devotee, the attitude of a devotee is that everything I was given is by the grace of Lord. I have to use all of them in his service. That is the attitude and of a devotee, right? So he never has his own plans for doing anything. He just surrenders completely to the will of Lord. So that is the nature of a devotee. So in this way, because he does not have any of his own plans and desires, a devotee is always considered it, the position of a devotee is considered better than any other practitioner of any other path. Yeah. A devotee of the Lord, constantly engaged in devotion service and Krishna consciousness, perfect in self-realization, very quickly attains liberation in the Supreme. Owing to his complete knowledge in self-realization, he always remains in trance. To cite an analogous example of this, Darshana Dhyana Samsparshaya Matsya Kurma Vihangama Swani Apatyani Pushnanti Tataham Apipadmaja. By vision, by meditation, and by touch, only do the fish, the tortoise, and the birds maintain their offsprings. Fish, tortoise, and birds, they maintain their offspring by vision. Fish just sees the fish, how it maintains its children. It just sees the babies and maintains it. Tortoise meditates on the baby and maintains. Birds put their feathers on the younger ones and maintain it. Similarly, do I also, Padmaja, O Padmaja. So this is how Lord maintains the devotees. The fish brings up its offspring simply by looking at them. The tortoise brings up its offspring simply by meditation. The eggs of the tortoise are laid on land, and the tortoise meditates on the eggs while in the water. Similarly, the devotee in Krishna consciousness, although far away from the Lord's abode, can elevate himself to that abode simply by thinking of him constantly, by engaging in Krishna consciousness. he does not feel the pangs of material miseries. This state of life is called Dhamma Nirvana, or the absence of material miseries due to being constantly engaged, constantly immersed in the Supreme. Okay? A devotee of the Lord is always thinking about how I can serve the Lord in a better way. And so the external situation does not cause any kind of misery to such a person, because he was constantly engaged, connected to the spiritual truth. Right? That is yoga. Yoga means huge connection. So he was always thinking about how he can serve the Lord. So that state is called Brahma Nirvana. See the birds, how they're maintaining the fish by looking them. Yeah. So now so this is the overall summary. So we discussed now this section, internal and external behavior, activities of a self-realized soul. So how does he do? He tolerates the forces of desires and anger and urges of all senses till death. How he tolerates? By focusing his happiness, activities, goals inward, and he develops higher taste by doing that. Purifying his external activities by working for the benefit of others. Fixed meditation on Supreme Super Soul. Soon attains liberation in the near future. Yeah. So if he tolerates, he will achieve liberation in the Supreme. Now towards the last section. Sparshan kritva bahirbahyams chakshus chaivantare bhruvo pranapano samam kritva nasabhyantara charinao yatendriya mano buddhi munirmoksha parayana vagatecha bhaya krodho jasada mukta evasa. Nitin Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu. Shutting out all external sense objects, keeping the eyes and vision concentrated between the two eyebrows, suspending the inward and outward breaths within the nostrils, and thus controlling the mind, senses, and intelligence. The transcendentalist, aiming at liberation, becomes free from desire, fear, and anger. One who is always in the state is certainly liberated.
So this is the process of Ashtanga Yoga mentioned here. In detail, it will be explained in the next chapter. But what is he doing? He is basically doing shutting down, all the external sense objects by keeping his eyes focused on the center of nostril, right? Between the eyebrows, suspending inward and outward breath. Right? We all have 6 airs in the body. There are airs that prana, apana, vayana. So there are 6 airs that are floating within the body. So the floating airs actually balance the soul. Right? The soul, we are all soul, the spiritual particle, right? That we are. The soul is actually balanced by the airs within the body. Right? So these airs can be controlled by actually first, those airs can be controlled by controlling your, the air that you breathe in and outward. Right? So great yogis, they can actually control their mind because everything is connected, right? In the subtle body, the mind is connected to your breathing. So by balancing your inward and outward breath, by deeply taking breath and then slowly releasing, at one point you can actually control the mind. So this is a physical process to control. So the goal is to bring stability to your mind. Okay, so that is the goal. So there are various types of processes. One is to control how you breathe. And because breathing is connected to your mind, mind gets stabilized. When mind is stabilized, you become free from desire, free, fear and anger. This is one way of controlling mind. There is not just one way. So this is physical way of controlling your desires, fears and anger. But how about devotees? Devotees don't engage in this activity. Devotees focus their energies using all their senses in the service of the Lord. And that is another way of control, because redirecting your consciousness onto spiritual aspects, that is another way. So this is how you can differentiate between the process of Ashtanga Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. In Ashtanga Yoga, you want to achieve the control of mind through dry meditation. In that meditation, you physically and mechanically control your breathing process, and thereby bring stability to your mind and become free from desire, fear and anger. Okay, what are the tools you used? You use your breathing as a tool and thereby control your mind and achieve freedom from desire, fear and anger. Doesn't mean that you will get full freedom. You still may continue to have vasanas, means inner seeds of desires. This is exactly the reason Vishwamitra Muni fired off. Even after having done meditation for many years, controlling his breath inward and outward, controlling his mind and senses, by doing all of that, still he could not control when there is an impetus. If there is no Urvasi, there is no Ramba, then he's not a problem. But when there is a powerful sense object, he could not control it. Because the reason is this process is mechanically controlling your system. This also works, but it is a very slow process. On the other hand, imagine, right? Your consciousness is now redirected completely to spiritual objects, meaning you are constantly thinking about how you can use different senses, like Ambarish Maharaj, to use in the service of the Lord. Who is Lord? Lord is the highest spiritual object. Now when you turn and use all your senses, your consciousness fully focused on Lord, it's like fire, right? And you put anything in fire, everything gets purified. So similarly, in that fire, all your material desires, all your material anger, material fear, all of those get subsided completely. Okay, so this is another way of purifying. So in this, what is the tool you used? You use your consciousness. Consciousness is a much subtler tool compared to gross senses. That is why this process in Bhakti Yoga is a far powerful process compared to any other process, because the tools used are far powerful. Consciousness is, what is consciousness is, awareness, your awareness, right? Your awareness means what you think, feel. So those things, if you direct towards the Lord, it's a powerful transformation process. So that's why Bhakti Yoga, many people think this is a process for simple-minded people. No, actually, this is the deepest and most powerful process, because the tool is the most powerful tool. You are redirecting your consciousness onto the Supreme Lord. So in this way, this is far more powerful than Ashtanga Yoga. Any questions on this? One who is always in this state is certainly liberated. So this verse is talking about just Ashtanga Yoga. I mean, this is a valid process and it works. And so Krishna also mentions this here. Yeah. After explaining the above principles of liberation in the Supreme, the Lord gives instruction to Arjuna as to how one can come to the position by the practice of mysticism or yoga known as Ashtanga Yoga, which is divisible into an eightfold procedure called Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi. In the 6th chapter, the subject of yoga is explained. Next chapter talks in detail about this yoga, and at the end of it, it is only preliminarily explained. So Now we are getting a glimpse of it. One has to drive out the sense object such as sound, touch, form, taste, and smell by the pratyahara process. Pratyahara means, ahara means food. Pratyahara means to drive away the food. What is the food for sense of touch? Soft objects. So drive away the food. What is this food for nostrils, right? So good smelling objects. So like that, every sense has a certain food, ahara. Prati ahara means to drive yourself away from those sensual attractions from you, right? And then keep the vision of the eyes between the two eyebrows and concentrate on the tip of the nose with half closed lids. There is no benefit in closing the eyes altogether because then there is a very chance of falling asleep. Nor is there benefit in opening the eyes completely because then there is hazard of being attracted by sense object. So the breathing movement is restrained within the nostrils by neutralizing the upmoving and downmoving air within the body. By practice of such yoga, one is able to gain control over the senses, refrain from this outward sense object, and thus prepare oneself for liberation in the Supreme. This yoga process helps one to become free from all kinds of fear, anger, and thus feel the presence of the super soul in the transcendental situation. In other words, Krishna consciousness is the easiest process of executing yoga principles. This will be thoroughly explained in the next chapter. The Krishna conscious person, however, being always engaged in devotion service, does not risk losing his senses to some other engagement. This is a better way of controlling the senses than by Ashtanga Yoga. Whatever I was telling, that is confirmed in this paragraph here. Bhakti Yoga helps you redirect your consciousness to the supreme object. Regular Ashtanga Yoga does the same thing. The goal is same, to purify your mind from the attractions of the sense objects. But it is a mechanical process, right? Because you are using physical senses. But in the Bhakti Yoga, you are using your consciousness. Consciousness is a spiritual object, right? Because your consciousness directly emanates from soul. So it is a spiritual thing. And you direct your consciousness to the Lord. So that's a much easier and better way of, to achieve self-realization. Now, the last verse, the most powerful verse. Bhoktaram yagyatapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suhridam sarvabhutanam nyatmamam shantimrichate. Rashmi Mataji, very powerful verse. Okay.
A person is full consciousness of me, knowing me to be the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices and austerities, the supreme lord of all planets and demigods, and the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities attains peace from the pangs of material miseries.
Wow, look at this verse. A person, Krishna is telling about his position. After describing about karma yoga, activities in Krishna consciousness, and the activities and the vision of a liberated soul, now Krishna is talking about who he is. A person in full consciousness of me means Krishna conscious, knowing me to be the ultimate beneficiary of all the sacrifices and austerities. Everything you do, all the meditation, all the pujas, vratas, everything. So that is the reason, even if you do Varalakshmi Vrata, Satyanarayana Vrata, or any other puja you do, the ultimate instruction, ultimate mantra that one chants towards the end of the puja is Sarvam Krishnarpanam. You look at any pujas, everybody towards the end offers, because everything is meant for Krishna's satisfaction. Explicitly, it is mentioned. You look at any pujas, they all do the same. A person knowing me to be the ultimate beneficiary of all the sacrifices and austerities means everything exists for his satisfaction. Right? So suppose I am the proprietor of a building, of a hotel, for example. Everything the servants do, everything that happens is for the benefit of the proprietor, isn't it? Similarly, the same thing. The whole world, everything is created and everybody is, engaged in various things. But the ownership lies with Lord. So every activity we perform, the ultimate beneficiary always remains the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord of all planets and demigods. So the Lord is also the supreme owner of all the planets. And he is the boss of all the demigods. And the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities. Suhridam Sarva Bhutana. He is not only father of human beings, he is also father of cows, dogs, cats, tigers, every animal, every bird, every living entity, whatever is living in this world. He is the ultimate benefactor and well-wisher. Who is your best well-wisher? It is the Paramatma, the Lord within you. Okay, Krishna says he is that person. Benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities, attains peace from the pangs of material miseries. If you understand this one concept, that the Lord is the supreme owner of all the planets and demigods, and the real benefactor, and who is the person who wants the highest benefit of us, it is the Lord. And who is the always well-wisher of all living entities in this world? That is also supreme. One who understands this, one who with no qualms and doubts accepts this simple principle about the ownership of everything, understands the ownership of everything to be the Supreme Lord, and who understands whatever happens in my life is, the mercy of the Lord. If one sees like that, right? One who understands, Lord always wants my best wish. He never does anything that is not good for me. Anything happens in my life is there to teach me something. If it is not, if it is not to my liking, one should understand that this is something that Lord is trying to teach me, that I'm not, that I need to understand. So one who understands Lord is never my enemy, he is actually my best well-wisher. He is my best benefactor. And he is the supreme of everything. He owns everything. I don't own anything in this world. Instead, Lord is the supreme owner of everything. Such a person leads a very happy life in this world. Jnatva santi mrichati. Such a person does not feel, he attains peace from the pangs of material miseries. No material miseries touch such a person. Okay? So one who understands, one who is always Krishna conscious, knowing me to be the ultimate, everything he does is he understands that it is for the benefit of the Lord. Because he is the supreme proprietor of everything, all the planets and demigods. This is direct statement of Lord. Krishna is not like another demigod. He is the supreme Lord. It's very clear from this verse, right? He is the supreme Lord of everything that exists. And he is the benefactor and well-wisher of all. He wants the best for us, always. One who understands this will attain peace from the pangs of miseries. Such a person will not go through material miseries in this world. The conditioned souls within the clutches of illusory energy are all anxious to attain peace in this world, in the middle world. But they do not know the formula for peace. This is called peace formula verse. If you want peace in your life, abide by the teachings of this verse. Understand, Lord is your ultimate beneficiary. Lord is your best well-wisher. Everything in this world exists. Everything that exists in this world is actually owned by the Lord. Bill Gates doesn't own anything. It's a temporary ownership. Everything, all his riches actually owned by Lord. Everybody's riches, everybody, whatever you have, your home, your car, your children, your husband, your family, everything is is owned by God. So it means that you should see them in relation to God. Meaning you don't see your children as your own children. You see they are gift from the God. Your husband as a gift from the God. Your family, your parents as gift from God. Your home as a gift from God. You become like in your home, you establish the altar is the place of the real owner of the home. You treat the Lord you worship at your home as the owner of your home, and you are just mere servant in that home. That's how you should live. Then you have no attachments. That is how you detach yourself from the things of this world. So you understand who you are in relation to everything in this world. You are here temporarily. You don't belong to the material world, first of all. You belong to the Vaikuntha planet. You are from there. Temporarily you are here. Everything in this world belongs to Lord. Everything that others want, don't become, oh, he has so much, I don't have. He has so much riches, I don't have. No, all that he owns is also Lord's. Nobody really owns anything in this world. Temporarily, it is in his hand. It's just like, two children are playing, and one guy collects more sand, other guy collects less sand. The child with less sand thinks that, oh, this guy has more sand in his hand. No, everything has to be given up. So nothing is going to come with us. So always, then you become lightheaded. You don't worry too much. I'm just here to serve the Lord. Everything in this world belongs to the Lord, and you just, that one thought takes away you become very peaceful and happy, because everything is ultimately owned by Lord. The only purpose, anything that you have, has any meaning only if you use in the service of the Lord in various ways. It doesn't mean that you give all your money in the name of temple. It means that you use for the right cause. You don't, you don't waste anything. Understanding that everything is owned by Lord, so it has to be used properly. So that simple understanding relieves you from all kinds of material miseries in this world. The conditioned soul, but they do not know the formula for peace, which is explained in this part of the Bhagavad Gita. The greatest peace formula is simply this: Lord Krishna is the beneficiary in all human activities. Means whatever activities humans do, Lord Krishna is the beneficiary. We think if people think, I am the beneficiary of my activity and you are the beneficiary of your activities, then there is competition between two of us. But if one thinks Lord is the ultimate beneficiary, then there is no competition. Men should offer everything to transcendental service of the Lord, because he is the proprietor of all planets and demigods thereon. No one is greater than he. He is greater than the greatest of the demigods, Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma. In the Vedas, the Supreme Lord is described Tamishwaram Paramam Maheshwaram. Under the spell of illusion, living entities are trying to be the lords of all the survey, but actually they are dominated by the material energy of the Lord. The Lord is the master of material nature, and the conditioned souls are under the stringent rules of material nature. Unless one understands these bare facts, it is not possible to achieve peace in the world, either individually or collectively. You can never achieve peace. This is the sense of Krishna consciousness. Lord Krishna is the supreme predominator, and all living entities, including the great demigods, are his subordinates. One can attain perfect peace only in complete Krishna consciousness. So this is the simple formula that is taught in the Bhagavad Gita. Understand who we are, who is Lord, and what's our relationship. This 5th chapter is a practical explanation of Krishna consciousness, generally known as Karma Yoga. The question of mental speculation is as to how Karma Yoga can give liberation is answered here. To work in Krishna consciousness is to work with the complete knowledge of the Lord as the predominator. Such work is not different from the transcendental knowledge. Direct Krishna consciousness is Bhakti Yoga, and Jnana Yoga is a path leading to Bhakti Yoga. Jnana Yoga helps you understand that you are not this body. But that understanding is only that understanding is not sufficient. You need to act on the platform that you are not this body. So that is enabled in Bhakti Yoga. Why? Because in Bhakti Yoga, any activity that a person does, he does that with clear understanding that I'm not the proprietor, Supreme Lord is the proprietor. Krishna consciousness means to work in full knowledge of one's relationship with the Supreme Absolute Truth. And the perfection of this consciousness is full knowledge of Krishna, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The pure soul is the eternal servant of God as his fragmental part and parcel. He comes into contact with Maya illusion due to the desire to lord it over Maya, and that is the cause of his many sufferings. As long as he is in contact with matter, he has to execute in terms of material necessities. Krishna consciousness, however, brings one into spiritual life, even while one is within the jurisdiction of matter, for it is an arousing of spiritual existence by practice in the material world. The more one is advanced, the more he is freed from the clutches of matter. The Lord is not partial toward anyone. Everything depends on one's practical performance of duties in Krishna consciousness, which helps one control the senses in every respect and conquer the influence of desire and anger. And one who stands fast in Krishna consciousness, controlling the above-mentioned passions, remain factually in the transcendental stage of Dhamma Nirvana. The Eightfold Yoga mysticism is automatically practiced in Krishna consciousness because the ultimate purpose is served. There is a gradual process of elevation in the practice of Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi. This is the Ashtanga Yoga. Yama means don'ts. Niyama means do's. Asanas means practicing various asanas, yoga postures, to keep your body healthy. Pranayama means actually breathing exercises to bring mind's control. Pratyahara. Pratyahara means to keep sense objects away from the senses. Dharana means actual meditation, right? And then dhyana means deep meditation. Samadhi means perfection of meditation. So this is called Ashtanga Yoga, and this is a gradual, it's called staircase method. You can go in a staircase method, practice Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranaya, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi. This is like one by one, you practice, it's called staircase method. The other method is called Bhakti Yoga, which is called elevator method. Elevator method means just by turning your consciousness towards God, doing everything for God's satisfaction, that's called Bhakti Yoga, and it directly gives the same result. But in this process, there is not so much, there is no mechanical advancement. So this is called mechanical advancement. The process of Krishna consciousness is, it's called a direct process, because the object and goal are same. The object and the means are same. In both you engage in remembering Lord. But these only preface perfection by devotion service, which alone can award peace to the human being. It is the highest perfection of life. So Ashtanga Yoga is more or less like a preface, like a stepping stone to actually perform pure devotional service. Ultimately, through practice of Ashtanga Yoga, one purifies his mind. After purifying mind, you need to act with pure mind, right? Those become pure spiritual activities. So you can do that by practicing all of this and achieving purification of mind and actually engaging Bhakti Yoga. Or Bhakti Yoga can also be the means, direct means. That's why I said it's like the elevator method. Bhakti Yoga is the means, Bhakti Yoga is also goal. Means Bhakti acts, is a process of sadhana, meaning you can you can do chanting, you can serve the Lord, pray to the Lord, Vandanam, Dasyam, you can do so many activities, Bhakti Yoga activities. So those you can do. So that is the process of elevation, purifying your mind. But after you purify your mind, what do? You again continue to do the same thing. Bhakti Yoga is like that. It's the means and it's also the goal. But for these other process, you purify mind through this, and then you actually meditate on the Lord. Right? Again, engage your mind. Once you purify mind, what do? You have to engage in the service of the Lord. Right? So it's like that. So it is the highest perfection of life. Any questions?
Prabhuji, I had a question.
Mhm.
In the very first verse that we read, right, you had mentioned like the qualification for one to provide like spiritual, to serve spiritually, they have to be like fully Krishna conscious. So I was just like, when is someone considered to be fully Krishna conscious?
Okay. So when is one fully Krishna conscious? It's a gradual process.
Because I mean, I would say like, I am still entitled to only serve in a material way, like, to give someone money or, serve them food or something like that. I wouldn't consider myself to be able to advise in a spiritual nature. So I was just curious, like when, do you become qualified to get to that stage?
When we become fully Krishna conscious, right?
Yeah.
So it's basically process of redirecting everything that we do to making all our activities spiritual activities. For example, you're working for a company, okay? But with the money you get, you completely engage yourself in the service of the Lord, right? Meaning you don't spend for extravagance, for your own gratification, right? And from the money you have, you can partly donate for spiritual causes. So in that way, your activity is purified. You raise your children in a very sattvic environment, teach them values. So your raising of children is Krishna conscious. You cook food at home, but you don't cook food just for your satisfaction. Instead, you meditate on the Lord and offer in your mind, or actually physically offer whatever you cook to the Lord, and eat whatever you offer to the Lord as prasadam at your home. So that is like cooking made the cooking activity becoming Krishna conscious. Right? So wake up, when you wake up, remember Lord. Right? So that is the process of sleeping is made Krishna conscious, because you worship Lord to the Lord, thank Him for everything that He has given just before going to sleep in gratitude. Your sleep becomes purified, meaning you sleep only so that you can wake up and serve the Lord. So in this way, your mind is completely centered on God, always. So that's what that verse says. But it is not easy for us. It's a gradual process. It's not like we can, always. We are not so purified to always be able to do all activities fully Krishna consciously. But at the beginning, at least at the time of chanting, or at the time of our prayers in the temple, we can be fully Krishna conscious. Our mind is fully on Krishna. So when a person's mind, body, and soul all are focused on Krishna all the time, so that is fully Krishna conscious. But it's a gradual process. You start with a small and then slowly add on to it, day by day, day by day. You will one day get there. Right? So it's a gradual process. It should happen, should never happen artificially. It should naturally happen over a period of time, and it will happen to all. Okay? Subconsciously it happens. That's why it happens. You don't do anything, very, very consciously. Over a period of time, learning Bhagavad Gita teaches so many principles that slowly and subconsciously we will change without our knowing. Just like if you do exercise every day, your body becomes healthy and strong. Without, you may not realize how much improved you are on a daily basis, but over a period of time, you can see, hey, my thoughts have changed, my ideas have changed, my my nature has changed. So people have all these kind of realizations as they advance spiritually. Okay, so that's how we all grow. It's a gradual process. There is no feeling bad that, oh, I'm not still there. It will happen. Just stick to the process. Like in the other verse, it said, those who stick to the process without becoming angry and controlling their mind and senses, just every day engage in spiritual activities, they'll be liberated towards the end of their life. It's already promised by the Lord, so it will happen.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Mataji. Very good question. Any other questions? So we ended 5th chapter successfully. So we will move on to the next chapter in the next class. Thank you all for joining today. I look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Very good.